Tonight, Palisade hosts Eagle Valley to begin the final week of the high school regular season. Wednesday, CHSAA released its seeding index to give teams an idea of where they stand going into the last leg of the season. Before we jump into each class's ranking, let's take a deeper look at what goes into the index. Each of the following make up 25% of the final number. First is the RPI. This is a mathematical calculation that factors in things like strength of schedule. Next is the coaches poll, which is exactly what you think it is. This is actually what Mike and I use each week when you see scores on the Friday Night Frenzy. Third is the Max Preps rankings. This comes directly from maxpreps.com and is another computer calculation that focuses on quality wins. Finally, the PACKARD ratings are similar to a power ranking structure. Let's start in 1A, and as we take a look, let's rejoin by Mike Kretz.
Yeah, Mark, look at this. 1A this season is stacked. A lot of good teams. Some could make a case for Strasburg to be a bit higher with a scoring margin of 51 points. Nobody scored a point against them. But, Mark, here's what we're looking for in the number 6 and number 7 spot, a couple of teams from the Western Slope.
That's right, Mike. Hotchkiss beat Meeker earlier this season, but it wasn't until this week that they finally jumped them in the rankings. Hotchkiss is looking for a perfect regular season this Friday at Cedar Edge. Meeker is going to try to put up a big number against winless Paonia to solidify their spot in the top 8.
All right, well, let's take a look at 2A, where the road, it's only going to get harder for Delta to make it back to Pueblo for a championship game. Nolan Bynum went down 2 weeks ago. Our thoughts are certainly with him as the injury ended his season. Then last week, Delta took an L on the road, and they took a deep dive, falling from number 2 down to number 7.
Mike, this is a classic example of the voters and computers projecting what Delta will look like without their all-state quarterback, which is understandable, but it's also the reason why this week's game against Elizabeth is so important for them. Not only do they need to win, but I think they need to win convincingly to quell the doubts ahead of this Sunday's bracket release.
Yeah, that's well said. In 3A, you're going to see 4 unbeaten teams in the top 8, 4 teams with only 1 loss. It's not until we get to that 9th spot that we find Palisade. Mark, the good news is they're in the hunt. The bad news is they're going to be relying on someone in the top 8 losing, preferably for the Bulldogs, one of those teams being one of those 1-loss teams.
Not only that, Mike, but as I mentioned in the breakdown of the seeding index, 3 out of the 4 criteria focus on strength of schedule and opponent schedule. I'm not worried about Palisade taking care of business against Eagle Valley. I'm worried about Eagle Valley not being a strong enough win to push the Bulldogs into the playoffs.
All right, last but certainly not least, 4A just jammed full of great teams. Palmer Ridge did a number to this class. We'll never know who would have taken the loss between them and Ponderosa. Again, COVID precautions complicating things. And here again, Mark, the 4A team that we have on the Western Slope is Montrose, who's in a similar situation as Palisade.
Look, I feel bad for Montrose in this regard. They're 3-2, and their 2 losses are against the number 1 and number 3 teams in the rankings, who they had to play in back-to-back weeks on the road. They don't get any love from the computers because they have to play against Grand Junction and Central, who have a combined 1 win. Expect a big number from the Indians Friday night at home against Central.